Welcome to the Shudder. I've got 3 stories here, all from the state of Wisconsin. The last story is a Dogman account, and I had done a Dogman account video last week, and there were 2 accounts in there that I said was from a mother and son. Well, I did the son's encounter and then the mom's. Well, Miss Lori, who is the mom in the account, called me and said, "Carrie, you did the wrong encounter." She said, "Mine was right, but you told the wrong one for my son. That wasn't him." So she directed me to the right account, and she wasn't upset or anything. She saw how I made the mistake, because the one I told was from a young boy and it was from the exact same town. So I apologize for the mix-up, and her son's account will be the last story on here. All right, settle in. My sister Natalie and I decided to take the 4-wheeler out after dark against our father's orders. We followed the trail from our property to the McMillan Marsh. There, we were able to run along a dike system between the reservoirs. It was midwinter. My sister was driving the 4-wheeler, and I was riding shotgun behind her along the dike. It was lightly snowing. Dark drew in quickly, and we were suddenly surrounded by darkness and snow with only 2 headlights to show the way. Suddenly, a large 7 to 8 foot creature walked up onto the dike in front of us, about 50 feet away. It stopped, turned, and looked right at us. We both noticed how the wind blew the long brown hair, about a foot long, on its side apart, and could see the skin was lighter underneath. Our 4-wheeler lights were not high enough to see the face, but it had a large muscular chest and arms, and walked like a man. The chest was a little more hairless, so you could see the rippling muscles under the dark hair. It had very long arms, and did not walk like a human. It sauntered along, totally unafraid of us. It swaggered with long arms swinging at its side, and then it went off the dike and into the wilderness. We were shocked and horrified. We sat in shock for a moment, and then throttled over to where it was standing. There were very large footprints in the soft snow. We hurried home and never told a soul until years later. We compared what we saw, and our stories were exact. We will never forget that night. It was not a wolf or a bear or anything human. I stand by that with my soul. If it were just me, I would have blown it off as a figment, but Natalie has every detail to the exact of my own. In 1961, I was a 15-year-old summer school student at St. John's Military School in Dalefield, Wisconsin. I lived in one of about 20 cabins that were organized in a semicircle in a forested area. In the 20 cabins lived other boys who were my age. At the center of the semicircle, there was a night lamp on a high pole, and vision was excellent. Under the light pole was a water fountain. The pole and fountain area is where all our group meetings took place. One night, I don't remember the time, perhaps 1 or 2 a.m., I awoke to see a very large, ape-looking creature who was drinking out of the fountain. The creature had to bend awkwardly to reach the fountain because it was at its knee level. By observing the awkward bend, I was able to discern that his or her height must have been enormous. Instead of drinking, the creature would spray the water out of its mouth and into the air. Then it would return for another gulp and spray again. Due to the light, I had a very clear view. I was amazed, but not yet afraid. After leaving the fountain, the creature took long strides and entered the first cabin. It stayed inside for about a second. It seemed that as soon as the cabin door shut behind it, the door instantly opened and it left the cabin. I noted that the creature had to duck in order to enter the cabin. The doors were rudimentary cabin doors with a spring but no latch. After leaving the first cabin, the creature continued to the second, third, fourth, etc., spending just a second inside each. I began to think that this behavior was consistent with a counselor doing a bed check, but I was really curious about the huge size and hairiness. My cabin was about the 12th one in line, and as the creature went cabin to cabin, my vision was getting better and better. Slowly, I began to feel frightened. Keep in mind that vision was excellent at the fountain, but when the creature entered the first cabin, I could not see very clearly. By the time the creature was preparing to enter the cabin next to mine, the student inside the cabin let out a huge shout. "Help!" Truthfully, I was getting ready to scream myself. When it heard the scream, the creature immediately sprinted with long strides to the rear of the cabin and disappeared into the forest. The creature ran through bramble and briar that would be difficult for a human to negotiate. As the creature approached the cabin next to mine, I did get a very good look. It was indeed a Bigfoot. The boy who screamed was very traumatized. A couple of days after the incident, his father came to Dalefield to take him home. This story was originally taken by Linda Godfrey and titled Camp Monster. I live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, USA. A lot of people in the cities have cabins in either northern Minnesota or rural Wisconsin. Our cabin was in rural Wisconsin in a small town called Danbury. The cabin is on Long Lake at the very end of Long Lake Road. Along with the cabin came almost an acre of land covered with thick forest. We carved a trail through the land for our ATVs and whatnot. I'm an outdoor enthusiast and have been all my life. I'm 6'4", fit, and have been a hunter since I was 12. I know my environment, the wildlife, and the forest, and I'm typically comfortable in the woods. I come from a military family, and I'm trained in multiple forms of combat. I also have extensive firearms training, and as a result, I'm fairly confident in my ability to defend myself. I'm not really scared of people. Big predators, on the other hand, like bears, wolves, and cougars, I'm not a big fan of. This brings me to the weirdness. I'm 23 now, but at the time of the incident, I was 16. Even at 16, I was a decent hunter and used common sense in the woods. I was at the cabin with my cousin and grandparents. It was middle of summer, I think July. My cousin and I were shooting each other with airsoft guns. We had a full-on battle going on throughout the property, including the woods, which were my stalking grounds. Our battle ended up 100 yards northwest of the cabin into the woods. We were standing on the main trail, talking about the events of the day. I was still on guard as usual. I suppose I could be considered a bit paranoid. We were still standing there when I noticed something move at our 12 o'clock, about 50 yards out. I got quiet and focused on that direction. My cousin was still talking, so I whispered, "Shh," and he stopped. I figured the movement I had seen was just a bird or something. As a joke, and to freak him out, I told him we were being watched. That's when I noticed the woods were dead quiet. No birds were chirping, nothing. I began to think this usually only happens when a large predator is around. I started looking even closer. That's when I saw it. At my 12 o'clock, there was this large animal. It had reddish-brown fur and blended in perfectly. I wouldn't have noticed it had I not been focused on it. It had long front limbs with what appeared to be formidable claws, and was standing kind of slouched down against a tree, like it was trying to be stealthy. Even though it was standing like that, it was nearly as tall as me. The only reason I believe I even saw it was because of its teeth. I think it was panting because its whitish teeth were visible. Its snout appeared to be elongated. My first thought was, we have to go. I even said that out loud. My cousin was already freaked. When I said those words, he bolted up the trail toward the cabin. He left me in the dust, because instead of running when he did, I waited a good 3 seconds, keeping my eye on it until I saw it move. It was fast. That's when I ran like hell. I didn't see which way it ran. All I know is that I heard it crashing through the woods. My cousin stopped at the shed, which was still about 50 yards from the cabin, to wait for me. When I caught up, I yelled, "Go, go, go," and we both bolted to the cabin. We got inside and shut the door. My grandma asked why we looked so panicked and had slammed the door shut. I knew they wouldn't believe me, so I said that we had seen a bear. My cousin nodded. Later that night, after my grandparents went to sleep, we talked about it. I asked my cousin if he had seen it. He told me that he had paused for a second to look back after he ran to see if I was running with him. He said he saw me still looking at it, and that's when he saw it move. He said he had mostly just seen a flash of fur. He went on to say he thought it wasn't the right color to be a bear. I agreed and told him that we only had black bears in the area and that it wasn't built like a black bear either. I told him I never thought it was a black bear. When he asked why I lied about it to my grandparents, I told him they wouldn't have believed us. We've kept it between the two of us until now. Still, the animal didn't match any known animal's profile in the area. I'm at a loss for what it might have been. I do know it was stalking us, though, and that it was built like an athletic predator, not like a bear. It wasn't as heavy set as a bear. After the incident, neither of us would go into the woods on foot alone without a gun. We generally only went back in the woods on ATVs from that point forward. I had always loved that cabin up until then. Fortunately, the cabin now belonged to someone else. Well, there you go. 3 Wisconsin cryptid accounts. And again, I apologize, Miss Lori, about getting a little mix-up with your son's account and yours. I do apologize for that. If you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up. If I can get any of my videos to 1,000 likes, it tremendously boosts the channel. So I really appreciate all of you that do take the time to just hit that little thumbs up button for me. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you guys back here next time for the Shudder.